All right, make sure we're recording. I am. So now what I'm going to go over is all the testing charts where you record your data. So we have three different charts separated by the modules, the areas of the body. So we have the lower body evaluations. So all four of the lower body evaluations are there. We have upper body evaluations and core evaluations. I'm going to do all the explanation for all of the charts in this one video here. It just makes it easier that I've printed them out in three different charts. It makes all the little boxes that you can insert all the data a little easier to write it instead of cramming it all into one chart. So first off, as you'll notice in all three of the charts, here's what's consistent is you have three different sections for three different evaluation dates. So you would write the date at the top, just look at my arrow here. First time you ever do that evaluation, the glute strength symmetry evaluation or the calf strength symmetry evaluation, you obviously record your reps in these blocks here. And then you just compare that to the next time you do the evaluation, 6 weeks later, 10 weeks later, whatever it may be. Now, let me go over each exercise here and talk about some of the sections on the left and how you'd utilize them, because obviously, evaluation 1, evaluation 2, that's easy. And, what reps you do on the left, what reps you do on the right, that's easy. You just record that there. Now, obviously, you're only going to do one of a given leg strength symmetry evaluation or a given glute strength symmetry evaluation or a given calf strength symmetry evaluation. So you have two options in each relative to the ability of the individual that you're working with. You're not supposed to do both. That's already been explained in the certification course, but just to make sure that we're clear on that. Now, if you do, let's look at the leg strength symmetry evaluation. If you do the single leg knee tap squat, what you're going to want to record is the depth that you used. Is it just one AirX pad? That's the normal. Is it two AirX pads? Is an AirX pad elevated on top of a thin weight plate? You'd write some sort of note letting yourself know, or is an AirX pad on top of a aerobic step? In the notes section, you'd want to make sure that you wrote a description on exactly what step that you use. Maybe you have a few different height steps. You can't just say weight plate, because is the weight plate this thick? Is it that thick? Depending on the weight plate. Is it 45 pounds or 20 kilos? Is it 10 kilo, 25 pounds? You understand where I'm coming from there. So you would record the specifics in the note section there. For the wall split squat, you would look at distance, and it's the distance from the wall to the back of the heel of the working leg, which is the front leg. So of course you're going to match that left to right, but you also need to know how far that is to match it from evaluation 1 to evaluation 2. And that's what you use your yardstick for. And then the load is obvious. In any of these sections, you just record whatever weight that you use. If you're using a band for something, kind of jumping ahead now, well, that's more for the upper body, but you would just write the color of the band for load, yellow band, blue band, whatever. Okay, now let's move on to the glute strength symmetry. So if you're doing either one of the hip bridge variations, whether with or without a weight plate, obviously if you're stronger, you would use the weight plate, you would record the height of how high that knee went of the elevated leg, the non-working leg. And that's good to understand which side, if there's any difference in height, but we're really not looking at the major difference in height. What you're doing is you're writing that down, and you're going to use the lowest height as your baseline. But just in case you forget from left to right side which one you're utilizing, you write it down there. Obviously, you would establish what's the highest point they can go on both sides before you actually start the test. You would pick the lowest side, because that way both sides can do it if there is a little bit of a height discrepancy. So you would circle, let's say they have two different heights. Let's say the left side went higher than the right. So you would use the height on the right side on each of the reps when you're actually doing the evaluation. So you would circle that height. That lets you know that's the one that you used, but it's always the lower number. However, you can look at that left to right difference, aside from the strength difference, using the same height, and say, is there a reason why one side can't get as high? Is it an ability thing? Is it a mobility thing? And you can use other interventions that you may know to work on that. Maybe you think it's some sort of restriction in the hip flexors or something like that. That's really not what we get at with the strength symmetry evaluation, but it's just some other data that you can utilize. So obviously load, you're not recording load for the body weight one leg hip bridge, but if you're using a weight plate, of course you would say what the weight of the weight plate is. And that way you keep that same load on each evaluation, at least for 3. And then if you ever do a new evaluation that would be a heavier load, then you would just use a different chart. All right, for the calf strength symmetry, you have your 2 options. You have your leaning option and you have your standing upright option. The only time you need to measure distance is when you're doing the leaning, because you want to make sure that you're the same distance from the wall to the front of the foot on the working side, which would be the down leg. So you want to make sure that's consistent. Just like the glute strength symmetry, you would use the shortest distance. So let's say you have one side that doesn't have as much available ankle dorsiflexion, so it can't go as far back and keep that flat heel in the foot straight. So for the sake of the test, you would use the shortest distance. But when you're establishing their ability to keep the foot flat and straight, or the heel flat and straight, and to see how far they can go back and maintain the proper alignment, you might find that one side can be a couple inches further back. So you could use that data for some mobility interventions to say, hey, maybe as long as you don't think there's some sort of structural limitation there, you can use some mobility exercises if you feel like that's relevant there. But again, if you have 2 different distances on left to right, you for the sake of the strength symmetry evaluation, you would use the shortest distance, because you know both sides can do that. And you would circle that distance on the chart here, so you know that's the one that you actually utilize to evaluate, to replicate on evaluation 2 and evaluation 3, your follow-up evaluations. All right, on the lower body, we also have a hip adductor strength symmetry evaluation. So again, you're going to look at how high they can raise the leg up while keeping the heel against the wall. And you will record how high they could go on the left and how high they could go on the right, and make sure that you have an established baseline height on both sides that they're capable of before you actually start the test. You establish that, so you write it down. That way you don't forget what the numbers are. And if there's any discrepancy in their ability, again, that's something that you may want to work on later. So now we will move on to the upper body. All right, so now we have our upper body strength symmetry evaluations. We have 3 different movements that we look at, and you really don't have to have any alternate options for these. So we have our cable half kneeling 1-arm row. Now, obviously, the load is understandable. You would write yellow band, red band, whatever band that would be. Distance would be how far you are from the anchor point of the band, to make sure you replicate that each time, so you get the same length, not only on each arm, but on each arm for each subsequent evaluation. Now, my recommendation for that is to simply mark off with like a piece of tape or some sort of water bottle or something on the floor, and that way you can use it. You say put your knee just behind this. Obviously, they're still going to be on the RX pad because it's more comfortable on their knee. So you want to make sure that you could put it off to the side of the RX pad, because if it's in front of the RX pad, they could still put their knee further back on the RX pad, and now you have some inconsistency of where they place their knee on the RX pad, even though the RX pad is in front of the piece of tape or the water bottle or something like that. So you can put it next to the pad and then make sure that their knee is just next to that or slightly behind it. You can use anything to mark that. But then you'd want to measure. Let's say you use a water bottle. You want to measure. You want to know how far that is from the wall or from the anchor point if you're using a band. Obviously, if you're using a cable, that doesn't make any difference. So you don't need to put anything there for the band distance. You can write in your notes, though, which cable that you used, because maybe you have 2 different cable systems in your facility. And as you know, different cable systems have different pulley setups, and maybe there's a different tension that actually you feel in your hand, whether you use one cable system versus the other based on the pulleys that are set up there. So that's what your notes section would be for. For the angled barbell, half kneeling, one arm press, when I say height, load is obvious. When I say height, what I'm talking about is the height of the anchor point. So are you just using a barbell in a corner? Or do you have it on a landmine where the barbell is elevated a little bit? Or do you have it in, I've seen people that have like a tall tube that is built for a landmine, but the actual angle of anchor point of the barbell is maybe a foot off the ground. So the higher the anchor point, which is the end of the barbell that you're not holding, the opposite end, the higher that is, that's going to change the leverage is going to change the tension that you're dealing with as you press it. So you want that to be consistent, not only from right to left, which of course it'll be consistent, but from evaluation 1 to 2, from 2 to 3, and however many you're going to do using subsequent, you're going to do using the same load. So now, for our push to pull strength ratio, obviously this is a bonus one. You wouldn't really mess with this until that you've got the upper body strength symmetry from left to right within baseline. But from here, you just measure the load that you're using, and you really don't have to record it twice, because if you're using it for seal rows, you're going to use it for a dumbbell bench press. So you just write the load in there, and then you record where your reps are. That one's as straightforward as it gets. So now we're on to our core evaluations. And by the way, I don't know if you heard that before, that little bit of that noise. Well, my cat ran off the counter here behind my laptop, knocked my laptop plug off, and that made my dog jump off the couch, and everybody got crazy there for a second. So if you saw me kind of jump, I was just making sure she didn't pull my laptop right off the counter while I'm teaching you here. So we have 2 different strength symmetry evaluations for the core. I'm going to start with the last one first, which is the anti-rotation test. Now, what you get, again, like you're doing with the row, you just want to measure the band distance. So you would measure how far your body was, basically the outside of whatever knees to the same side of the anchor point of the cable if you're using a band, to make sure that you're the same distance both from left to right side, but also from evaluation 1 to evaluation 2. So again, while you're actually doing the evaluation, of course, you could mark that with a water bottle and just say, hey, keep your left knee in line with this water bottle. And then your right knee when you flip sides, whatever. You could put a piece of tape on the floor. Always keep the piece of tape there once you've kind of preset a distance, and you just use that as your reference guide all the time, every time you do one of these evaluations. That's really up to you. Whatever works best with your environment. And then load, again, if you're using a band, if you're using a cable, you just write the load, whatever it says on the, on the selected weight, 30 pounds, 40 pounds, whatever, 20 kilo, whatever. If you're doing a band, you would just write the color of the band under load there. All right, now for the lateral core strength symmetry, we have basically a side plank, but we have 3 different variations depending on the person's level of ability. We have the good old fashioned staple side elbow plank with your legs straight and your feet stacked on one another. But if you think that's easy for them and they can smoke at least the minimum of a minute on each side, or the maximum of a minute on each side, and that would just be easy for them, and you don't think that would tell you much data, then what you would do is you would do the second one listed as the option, which is the side elbow plank with a hip abduction, and the top of the foot, or sorry, the top ridge of the foot. So if this is my right foot and I'm facing you, this is the top ridge of my right foot. It should be even with my top shoulder. And that way, you're going to match that on both sides. And of course, you want to make sure they keep good alignment. So all you do is just record how much time they were able to maintain perfect alignment on the left side, and then on the right side, and you compare. Now, if a regular side plank is too much for them and that's too advanced to their current level, you can still do a bent knee version with the knees bent to 90 degrees. That's at the top. It doesn't mean it has to be at the start. Some people start with some hip flexion at the bottom and then they extend their hips as they come up to the top. That's fine as long as they keep that they maintain that alignment between the shoulder, hip, and knee as they do the actual plank. For testing purposes, that's fine, and just keep their knees bent at 90 degrees, one leg obviously stacked on the other. And again, same thing. You would just record left side and right side time. And then the notes section, as you can see on all of these, if there's anything else that you need to record that's relevant, you just write it in the notes section. And if there's anything else that you need to write for yourself and you don't have room on any of these charts, just flip the paper over and write all the notes on the back. Pretty simple stuff.